Check this out.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Development Economics, Lesson 1, and it's titled The Common Road Between the Rich and Poor. When you watch on the screen, you would see an image of what most people aspire to be, that's the rich community. Blocks, housing decent, environment clean, there's a self-assurance of a regular flow of income, an adequate flow of income. There's an assurance of better health facility, and even with respect to the income, when there's recession, they still have some money in reserve to take care of it. Adequate food, 3 rooms or 4 rooms. They have 2 cars parked, 2 children, most likely, or 3 children, and the children one may be in a top university, maybe in North America or somewhere in Europe. The second one may be in maybe Spain or somewhere doing a university program, and then the junior one may be in a boarding school in Europe where it's private. All right, because the income is good. Health is assured because they can ensure their health maybe with Bupa or another health insurance policy that is of essence. Anywhere in the world they can be flown into. Their streets are clean. But if you watch the coming video, all right, here we have another video. Is up here. This is another video, and you see this is shanty town with 2 rooms, 1 room likely to be for the parents, and the other room for children, grandchildren, grandparents, or grandchildren, grandparents, children, all clumped in 1 room, or they can both all share. They're about a family of 10. And this is what it is. You check the environment again and you see there's so much waste pile up there. That is what they are living in. What smells to them stinks. What smells to them stinks. Because they already are living in stench sometimes, and it's abject poverty. They are not short of 3 square meals, whilst the earlier one they are short of 3 square meals plus snacks. And this one, they are not short of 3 square meals, maybe 2 meals a day, and that will not even be sufficient. They may be peasant farmers, parents will be working in the farms, or parents will be working for others with an income below 75 cents or 75 cents at most a day. This is what the video is. The road between the two is just one straight road. That notwithstanding, we have a situation where you can see that the waste itself is breeding environmental pollution and then health condition for the mosquitoes, corolla and co can break up in that environment. This is what poverty looks like. Poverty stinks. And what it is what we call extreme poverty. What we are having in this image is extreme poverty. Health, they cannot be assured of getting onto the health insurance scheme. So they rely on the traditional herbalist who is going to use plant medicine with unknown toxicity levels. They can use the babalawos for some of their medicals. And so health is itself problematic to them. Health is problematic to them. Health delivery is problematic to them. You can assure yourself that income flows are low, the housing as we see is shanty, the community is just not the best, work income inflow is far low, and access to education for children is not any likely to be above high school. Or if it does, fine, because most of the children, they give birth to a lot, most of the children, some may be hawking on the street, the ladies may be hawking, the male children or the boys may go up cleaning car screens on highways, traffic prone highways, and may get themselves involved in petty thievery and theft and all sorts of things. Sometimes if they are older, they become armed robbers. It does not necessarily mean that the poor children become armed robbers, no, but they do that for survival, and we have to take note of this. It doesn't mean that rich people's children also don't get themselves involved in armed robbery, but they rob big time with their pen. All right. Okay, that's it. Okay, now today's discussions, we have a fair idea of what extreme poverty is and then what wealth or rich is by pictorial diagramming. All right. The difference is just a common root. They both live in the same community, either it's urban or rural. If it's rural, the whole rural community is actually poor. But if it's urban, it's a road that divides the two. If it's between countries, it's the ocean. Between the continent of Africa and the continent of Europe or America is the ocean, and then that of Asia is the ocean. Okay, so then now let's look at it. What are we going to learn today? We're going to visualize, we're going to appreciate a visual representation of extreme poverty. Then we're going to visualize that of wealth. We're going to be looking at it from housing, education, income levels, and health. Then what is extreme poverty? We have to try to explain what it is in Africa and the percentages that, nominal and percentiles that goes with it. Then what is SDG 1 and SDG 5? What does it say with respect to extreme poverty? What are the measures of extreme poverty by World Bank? Then we'll also look at the definition of extreme poverty by UN. We'll look at the definition of what development economics or economics development. Economics in development or economics development economics rather. Then we shall differentiate between development economics and traditional economics. We'll also be looking at what is the essence of GDP and GNI, and then what are the challenges that there are and why we have to study development economics. All right, without wasting time, we have tried to show by pictorial diagram what the affluent community looks like and what the deprived community looks like, extreme deprivation looks like. So it takes us to what is extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is a condition where people are severely deprived of basic human needs like food, water, shelter, clothing, education, information, adequate information. So that's extreme poverty by UN, defined by UN. All right. In that sense, we now have an idea of what extreme poverty is. However, that's not all. World Bank is a bank that deals with monetary issues, and so they also have to quantify what extreme poverty is. And what they are describing as extreme poverty is they have taken the poorest 15 countries, looked at the income, daily incomes, and averaged it, and they found it to be $1.9 per day. So any country below $1.9 a day, or in some authors say $2 a day, spending that in this quantitative form is extreme poverty, and that we cannot discount. We have to accept. So we are matching the two, UN's definition, World Bank definition. UN definition, just as a by recap, is what? Severe deprivation of basic human needs. Then UN is saying anything below $1.9 per day. All right. If you earn less than $1.9 a day, we found out that in Africa, about 445 million are living in extreme poverty in Africa as of the year 2022. And that is a report from the UN and the World Bank. 445 million Africans are living in extreme poverty. That's they are making below $1.9 a day. And so it's difficult. It's quite difficult. It's not about the emotions, but how are we going to address that? And that's the issue. You can find about 80% of the people in South Sudan are living in extreme poverty. You go to 70% of the people in Burundi, Madagascar, Central African Republic, and Democratic Republic of Congo, DR Congo, also living in abject poverty. I mean, they are living in extreme poverty. Sometimes we call it deep poverty. The US use the term deep poverty. World Bank and UN use extreme poverty. Okay. Ghana has about 3 million people living in extreme poverty. Nigeria has 88 million people. In Nigeria, 88 million people are living in extreme poverty, when the Nigerian population is 240 million, making them about 41%. It is high. 41% of the population living in extreme poverty is not good. Even that of the UK, about 3.8 million people are living in extreme poverty. Okay. So then we are caught up in a situation where we have to discuss these issues. It's about economics. But is it going to be the traditional economics to look at what poverty is and how to get it out? I'm not too sure. Why? Give it a thought again. We'll come to that. Trying to get it out will not be through the traditional economics, but it has to be economic development or development economics. The further we talk of extreme poverty, it takes us to SDG 1, And SDG 1 says, okay, SDG 1. SDG means what? Sustainable Development Goals. It says you end poverty for all, everywhere. Let us end poverty for all and everywhere. That is SDG 1. That's Sustainable Development Goal 1 by UN, which is a follow-up on the Millennium Development Goal. So then if that is the case, how do we convert this data that we have into something better? They've set a certain standard, and so you find out in Africa, countries like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Seychelles, Mauritania, Egypt, and Cape Verde, Libya have achieved the minimum standard, and that is by Akins and McLachlan. I guess I get it right, McLachlan. They came up with that report in 2022. So then, if these countries in Africa have attained SDG Goal 1, what about the rest? Are they going to make it? Are we going to make it in Africa? Those are issues that we have to discuss. And whilst we're discussing it, we're going to go into what? Development economics. That is what it's all about. All right, let's take a commercial break and we'll be back shortly. Yeah, welcome back to Development Economics, or Economic Development, Lesson 1. That is the common road between the rich and poor. So far we've discussed and we have explained what extreme poverty is, which is a condition, just as a recap, a condition where some people or where those affected cannot meet basic needs for human beings. That's food, shelter, water, health, education sometimes, yeah, and then information. All right, so we cannot gain all those things. We cannot attain all those things. So that's extreme poverty. Following that, we know this. So what does it do to us? If we take the traditional economics, because the world has moved on, because we talked about modernization ever since the 1930s into the 40s, into the 50s, it became more prominent when African countries gained independence in the 50s and 60s. They thought that political independence would give them economic advancement, and economic advancement was what we call modernization from the Western standard, Western technology, and Western values, and that is what has eluded most African countries. So why did it elude most African countries, and how has it eluded most African countries with such extreme levels of poverty? And that is what development economics comes to do, because the traditional economics is looking at output and quantifying numbers, monetary figures, GNI, GDPs, and co. Gross domestic product, that's GDP, and then gross national income, that's GNI. That's what it's looking at, but it has not. GNI keeps increasing, GDP keeps increasing, but it has not trickled down to the individual for its benefit. And that is where the problem is. So traditional economics looks at those bits, but it's supposed to have gotten a trickle-down effect, but it has not, sadly. So if it has not, then what should we do? By the 70s, economists were all screaming all over the world that no, it looks like the economics that we are having, the traditional economics, is not resolving the issues of poverty. It's not resolving the issue of income levels. It's not income distribution. It's not resolving the issues of health. It's not resolving the issues of education for all. There's so much deprivation in some countries where, though their GNI and GDP keep increasing, they still haven't gotten that aspect on the micro level. On the macro level, GDP is growing high, like Ghana, for an instance. On the macro level, the GDP keeps growing high, and the governments keep praising themselves, but the people are struggling. Individuals are struggling, they are gnashing, and that is a problem. And so traditional economics can do it, but development economics is what we have to be looking at. In that sense, what does Amartya Sen, who is a Nobel Prize winner, describe or explain what development economics is? He says, you can see development economics as enlarging opportunities for people's freedom and human choices. That's what it says. So if that be the case, we'd have to look at what are the differences between traditional economics and development economics. We look at it, you will notice that traditional economics is old. to start with, is quite common. And development economics is new. Okay, that is first point. Traditional economics is quite narrow, whilst development economics is broad and wider. It encompasses a lot. We would understand it better here. Look, whilst traditional economics, that's the third point. Whilst traditional economics is talking about GDP, gross domestic product, and GNI, gross national income. Development economics is saying, yes, we have GDP, we have GNI also as part, but we have to look at the health of the people or socio-economics factors as the health of the people, education, inequalities should be considered as part of economic studies. And that is very important and appreciable. So it has widened their scope of study, and it keeps widening. So the scope of economics is widening based on development economics. And you see how the extreme poor, which image we saw, can transcend to the other side of the road, which is what? The wealthy side of the road. We can all not be equal, but at least we can eliminate poverty. That's the idea of development economics. Then, if you look at traditional economics, it's just production oriented. It's just production. It looks at the labor force briefly and then the structural changes in productivity. However, development economics looks at what? The human aspect, the human growth, human capital, standard of living. It's looking at working conditions, then a mortality rate. That's development economics. So, whilst traditional economics is looking at improving growth without improving the human life or believingly to improve the human life through trickle-down effect, development economics has gone further to ensure that the trickle-down effect resolves poverty, inequalities, income levels, and unemployment and health. And that is what it's about. It goes on. We can look at one other or two other differences between traditional and then development economics. This we have said already, that traditional economics, whilst it's seeing development, is seeing increase or growth in gross domestic product and gross national income. Development economics is looking at how poverty, extreme poverty, can be eliminated, and then inequalities are sorted out. So if you want to look at improving inequalities, you are talking of the income levels, education, health, liberties and freedom. Liberties and freedom. Those are the issues we are talking about. So let me just go over. We are talking of the environmental conditions. We are talking of education for all. We are talking health for all. We are talking of nourishment, food, liberty, freedom for all. All right. That's said and done. Now we know the difference between traditional and then development economics. So our focus now is how do we use development economics to resolve the poor's problems. See, how do we use it to resolve the poor problems? Basically, let's start from the traditional economics and then enter the development economics, sort of, which is the best way to go around it, I would think. So with the traditional economics, in solving poverty, they look at gross national income and gross domestic product. That hasn't, we are saying it hasn't gotten that trickle-down effect, and it's problematic. But then, what is GDP, gross domestic product? Gross domestic product, GDP, is the total output of goods and services within the country and by the country. All right. So then, what is GNI, gross national income? Gross national income has got to do with the total domestic and foreign output claimed by the country within the country and then by residents and non-residents. So there's a difference. GNI encompasses that of GDP because GNI has got the foreign bit and GDP has got only domestic bits. Meanwhile, GNI has both the domestic and the foreign, so it captures GDP. All right. If that be the case, what are problems? The problems here is that why is it that GDP and GNI has not resolved extreme poverty or poverty in various countries, especially in Africa and other developing countries? It's because, one, we have not taken time to look at the trickle-down effect. And if it's looked at, you look at the per capita income. Per capita income, you take GDP divided by the population, it takes you to GDP per capita income. When you do that, does that mean that each and every person has been given that amount of money? No. Unfortunately, no, it doesn't go with the trickle down effect because it keeps increasing, but people become poorer and poorer over the years. As the years go by, people are becoming poorer and poorer. Meanwhile, the GDP and GNI is increasing on the gross, and then even on the per capita is increasing. So it means that there's a missing link. And that missing link is what you and I would have to try to resolve whilst we're going through these discussions subsequently. We're going to look at the challenges of poverty, how GNI and GDP has to be re-looked at. Why? Why is it that the country is becoming wealthy but the people are becoming poorer? Is it because of the contracts that are negotiated by the foreign bodies? Is it because of globalization? Is it because external industrialization is taking place in various developing countries that the foreign advanced economies or developed economies are exploiting the developing economies? Is it that the least developed economies are taking advantage of the developed economies to employ their people? There are questions that we have to ask ourselves. Is it because we have not learned lessons from the past of the developed economies who had structural problems like ours? Is it because structured adjustment program has not worked? What about our health? What about income distribution? What about education? Those are issues those are challenges that we'll have to resolve, and many more. The other bit is that what happens if a country goes broke? It's just gone broke. Is it Bretton Woods institution putting up conditions that are helpful? What about sustainable development for developing countries? Are we meeting the goals? Has it helped us? Will it help us? These are issues that we'll be exploring as we go along using development economics theory. It doesn't mean that development economics is stopped. It's still evolving. It's a new discipline started sometime attributable to Adam Smith, far back as 1707, and it's evolving. And this evolution, we have Amartya Sen and co who are working on it. We have Tudaro, who is also coming out. It's also an authority in development economics, coming up with various views and then understanding. So we have a lot to learn in this particular remit, especially like Ghana, for an instance, where you are working on inflation and inflation is coming down, interest rate is coming down, but the people are becoming poorer. When it should have been the other way around. Is it because the economy is unstructured, whilst traditionally the economy is structured, where they have free market economy, there's homogeneity in products and all that? We're going to look at, is it demand and supply? Is it that government is fixing prices? Government is fixing prices for utilities and all that, for fuel. Though there's competition, there's deregularization, government is still fixing prices, minimum prices. Those are issues that will come up. It means that the eclectic nature of the developing economies makes it difficult for you to use a one-size-fits-all formula or one pill resolve all formula. But we're going to be using various pills, various country differential approaches. You cannot always use inflation and interest rates to control the wealth of the nation. Pricing, you cannot use interest rates to control inflation. In Ghana, for an instance, whilst you are increasing interest rates, inflation is going up. Whilst you are reducing interest rates, inflation sort of seems to be stagnant. It can be funny. So you don't necessarily use the same tool that we read in our traditional economics to use in other developing economies. So we'll be looking at things like that. And the name is H. Kwame Afaglo.